So it's that time of year again. The darkness is approaching, and I thought, what better time would there be for us to speak about that long last journey, the final journey, the journey that every Celt took at the end of their lives into the Celtic Otherworld. So let's talk first about what we know about the Otherworld. According to the continental Celts, the Gallic tribes, there were three worlds. The upper world, Albios, the middle world, Bitu, the world of the living, and Dubnos, the underworld. Now the underworld was the world of the gods, the spirits, and the dead. But not all the gods. It would be a mistake to think all the gods were gods of the underworld. There were gods of the light and there were gods of the dark, and there were some gods that were gods of both lightness and darkness. For instance, if we look at the three Celtic sun gods, Mabon, Lugh, and Belenus, we can see that being sun gods, they are bringers of both darkness and light. And so these are gods of both the upper world and the underworld. And I just wanted to make that point clear, because this is an interesting topic that I've got planned for a little later on down the track. The main point here is that the underworld was the place of the ancestors, the spirits, and the dead. So let's come back to that long last journey of the Celts. Now we're given a story from the principal Roman historian of the 6th century, Procopius. And this is what he tells us about the Celtic belief in the journey to the underworld. He tells us that the Gallic tribes of continental Europe believed that after death they would travel northwards and take a boat across the channel to the mystical Isle of Britain. It said that when they reached Britain, and there were enough of them, they would be gathered together by the local fishermen, who would then sail them across the ocean, westwards across the ocean, to reach their final destination in the underworld. Now, travelling westward is significant, I think, because the sun sets in the west, and it was always thought that the sun, being the bringer of darkness and light, died every day, and when he died he went to the underworld. And so it makes sense from their perspective, seeing as the sun sets in the west and it goes down into the underworld, then this is clearly where the underworld was. But this isn't universal as amongst the Celts as to where the underworld lay. Now we have to think of the Celts as a tribal society and compare them to other cultures that we know a little bit more about. And oftentimes I take the Native American cultures, the indigenous Americans, and they have many stories which share some similarities, but there's also lots of differences amongst them. And I think we have to see the Celts in this kind of light. We know there were some pan-Celtic beliefs, but I think we We must see it in such a way that there would have been regional and even tribal differences between the belief systems. We know that some Celts saw the entrance to the underworld as some kind of hole into the ground, such as a cavern, or even some of these passage graves that weren't constructed by the Celts, but they were there. And these holes led them, they thought, through into the underworld. Then there are other beliefs that the Celtic underworld could be entered under the water, either under a river or through a bog or under the sea. And then there are those other beliefs that, as we've seen in our story, that the underworld was accessed by travelling westwards to a mystical island. And I can see that all of these would have been valid beliefs in how you could enter the underworld, and we shouldn't forget that the Celts believed that you didn't have to die to enter the underworld. There are stories that tell us how people have entered this underworld, and they were gone for maybe a few hours, but when they'd returned, decades had passed. So let's return back to our story now about what happened to the Celts, or what they believed happened once they reached the underworld. Now, there's a number of sources out there that tell us that the underworld was not the end for these souls of the dead. It was a resting place where the souls could recover, and it was the land of the everlasting summertime, and a land where there was no battles or fights, and everything was in complete harmony. But at some point in time, their souls would be reincarnated back into the world of the living. And this was a continuous cycle until the soul, the individual, had learned enough to be able to transcend to the world of pure spirituality. So I hope you've all enjoyed today's story on the Celtic belief of the long last journey, and if you have, then please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and I'll see you again in another 2 weeks on the next episode.